Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 8. Episode 8, I had to remind myself the number. We had a quick turnaround. It is Saturday, March 21st as we're recording this. So it's a little bit, once you listen to it, it's a little bit late, but happy Down Syndrome Awareness Day. We talked about that last episode with Kate, and we're about to record this and head out to dinner. Hopefully you participated in the fundraiser for Ruby's Rainbow that we shared. We appreciate it. Hopefully you wore your crazy socks today and just got to recognize the beauty that is people that have Down syndrome. What are we going to talk about today? Well, first off, before we introduce our topics for today, make sure you follow us on our social medias: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Find us wherever you catch your podcasts, and make sure you find us on YouTube. What are we talking about today? We're going to start with free agent frenzy, give a little bit of insight into some deals. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then we'll talk about the Steelers, a little bit of outlook for them, the mock draft pick for them we'll talk about. We'll briefly touch on March Madness. We'll probably talk about that as we approach the end of the bracket and then the end of the tournament a little bit more. And then we are having a I Was Thinking segment today with the return of Am I the Asshole segment. So we'll take a peek at that here in a little bit. I think this is the first episode. Kate, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going hatless today. I don't know how I feel. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. We'll go with that. Let's talk some NFL free agent frenzy. A lot of the stuff really that we'll talk about, particularly when we get to the Steelers, we're not going to talk free agency. We're going to talk the deals that have been made during the free agent frenzy. So let's get started. I took a look at, I believe it was either ESPN or NFL, and they listed 10 of the top moves made during this free agency period. And I picked out a couple, and we're going to talk about those. I think one of the ones that could have major implications for both teams is the Los Angeles Rams trading for Trent McDuffie. So I think that's a good start, and I think the impact is going to be felt more for the Chiefs. I think it gave them maybe a little bit of cap space. This turned out to be the biggest blockbuster trade of the offseason once the Crosby deal fell out. We'll talk about that here in a second. I do agree the Rams needed help at the corner position just to solidify their defense. I think, when you look at a football team, there's two core positions on each side of the ball that need to be very good. And I learned this in 2022. If on offense you're good at quarterback and you're good at the offensive line, you're going to be solid on offense. If on defense, if you're good at the defensive line and the cornerback position, you're going to be pretty solid. So I think them going after some help at the corner position is going to be big for them. I do think Trent McDuffie was a good option there. And, particularly, I don't know why the Chiefs were looking to give him up again. Maybe some cap space. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not in that room, so I don't want to comment too intensely on that, but it's a great deal for the Rams. I'm really excited to see where it pans out for the Chiefs, being a very anti-Chiefs guy, and I'm in a weird dynamic with that, where I am a big believer in Andy Reid. I think he gives hope to bigger guys everywhere, but I don't like the Chiefs. I don't love the Chiefs. Kate may like this, and we can send this to Kate's friend. I don't know that I was really as anti-Chiefs until Taylor came into the picture, but very, very much against what Swifties do in the game of football. But I think this weakens the Chiefs a little bit more on defense. I think it weakens them a little bit as a team. And the thing that I think this season showed is that they're not an immortal team. They're just a football team. And I think, making some of the moves as shocking as this one was, I don't know how that does for your team and your organization. So I think great move for the Rams. I think it's questionable by the Chiefs. We'll see how that goes. This one we'll probably spend a little bit of time talking about. We'll start with the Max Crosby deal leading into the second deal. I had a buddy reach out to me as soon as that Max Crosby deal fell through. Well, and I remember it's the same buddy that told me the Max Crosby deal was happening, with Crosby going from the Raiders to the Ravens, and I instantly thought, well, at least as a Steelers fan, we're kind of out of it now in the AFC North. Particularly, both our offense, I don't think would compete very well with a rusher like that, with a defensive player like that. But just even in general, I think, bold statement, call me crazy. I hope I get proven wrong on this, but Max Crosby is a much more consistent player than T.J. Watt right now, in my opinion. Maybe not as successful, obviously. I don't think the thing that I think is different when looking at the comparison between Watt and Crosby is in the supporting cast. I think Watt's had a much better group of people around him defensively playing, and in reality, I know what I just said doesn't support this, but I think Watt is a much better player than Max Crosby, but I think Crosby has been much more consistent in his play. So what would that have meant for him to go to the Ravens? I think you're getting a competitive and much more consistent star defensive player in your conference, and I think that weakens us as the Steelers, particularly competing against our offense that doesn't have a very good offensive line. We'll talk about that here in a minute, or a couple minutes. We'll get to them, but I think that would have been the biggest deal the Ravens have done in a long time. So I don't know what happened. Obviously, it was something with his physical and everything, but for Max Crosby to fall through, and hearing, and again, it's all hearsay. I can't guarantee what happened. I can't guarantee why certain moves were made and why certain moves were canceled. But for Crosby to fall through with seemingly no head coach contact, no GM contact during his visit, and the process of everything, how do you qualify yourselves as a top tier? Because the Ravens are a very good organization. It burdens me to say that, but they're a very good organization. So how do you consider yourselves that when you don't meet with what could potentially flip your organization, right? I don't think the Steelers beat the Ravens with Max Crosby on their line. I don't. I definitely don't think the Browns and the Bengals got a shot. So, that's huge. Fast forward to what the Ravens do. They sign Trey Hendrickson, who's been desperately trying to get the hell out of Cincinnati. I can't blame him for that. For all the, I think, I don't think it's a horrible move. It's far from what they were getting in Crosby. It doesn't excite me though, and I'm not a Ravens fan, so but as an outsider, I think he helps you, but he's not Max Crosby. So we'll see how that turns out for them. I don't think it's great. It's cheaper. It's cheaper, much cheaper than Max Crosby. Both are coming off of injuries. I think Hendrickson's got a little bit more, some more miles on him than Crosby does. But, as a Steelers fan, I feel much, much better about them picking up Hendrickson than getting Crosby. Kansas City Chiefs, so we're flipping back to the Chiefs. I do think, if anything, we talked about them freeing some cap space in the McDuffie trade. They signed running back Kenneth Walker from the Seahawks. Pretty good price and I think it boosts your offense. And the one point that they made in the article that I really liked is it does show some commitment to revamping their offense and maybe taking a little bit of the pressure off of Mahomes. And I know that's just the quarterback he is. As much as I dislike the Chiefs, and Mahomes, well, I don't dislike Mahomes. I love how Mahomes plays. I've always loved that style of quarterback. I think he's better at being Brett Favre than Brett Favre was. But I've always loved that style of quarterback. Like I said, the Favre, Mayfield, Kyler Murray, who I don't know if I put on here. But those kind of Manziels. right? The Manziels of the world. I think if Johnny Manziel had any ounce of character behind him, he would have been probably top tier quarterback to ever play the game of football. But what does Kenneth Walker do for the Chiefs? It takes a little bit of pressure off of Mahomes. I think that allows him to be what he wants to be at the quarterback position and what he's been for the Chiefs at the quarterback position. I think it allows him to be a little bit better at that. Just because now you have, and they've had running backs. They've had good running backs, but now they have a little bit more support there than he's had in the past. So I think that's a good move. I think, the McDuffie trade frees a little bit of that up. We'll see. The Dolphins signed Malik Willis. I think that's something that was just, written in somebody in the football gods books somewhere, with the hiring of their new GM, who's from Green Bay, their new head coach, who's from Green Bay, and they have a new quarterback from Green Bay. I think that was inevitable. I don't think it's horrible. So he has some experience, but it is, I love this line. It feels like a roll of the dice. And honestly, at some point, especially with where the Dolphins have been, I don't think a roll of the dice is a horrible decision or a horrible plan. I mean, you got to do something. Sometimes you got to make chicken salad out of chicken shit, right? So, we'll see. I don't love it, but the thing that I think the Dolphins are doing really well is they're building around him. I do think Malik Willis has a better chance than Tua ever had. I've never been a Tua fan. Sorry, Garrett. My buddy that we talk about and talk with on the show a lot, Garrett, for whatever reason, likes Tua. I hate Tua. Hate's a strong word. I don't hate it. I don't hate Tua. I dislike how Tua plays. I don't think he's a reliable quarterback. I don't think he's a reliable option, and I do think Malik Willis gives you some upside. We'll see where that goes. I do think they're doing a good job of building around him with bringing in Jalen Waddle. So we'll see. I think that they're on the right track. It's a roll of the dice quarterback, and sometimes with a roll of the dice signing, you get a roll of the dice result. So we'll see. Don't love it, but I think there's worse decisions. One of those is coming up next with the Falcons signing Tua. I mean, and they have tools on offense. I don't think Cousins was the option anymore. He's for whatever reason put him on the Steelers roster because we like to sign old quarterbacks whose careers the sun has already set. It's just getting darker and darker. But I don't think Cousins was the option. I definitely don't think Tua was the option because they have stuff for him. He can be successful there. Any quarterback, really, in my mind, could be successful there. Maybe not Kirk Cousins. Maybe not Tua. We'll see. He's, probably a cheaper option. We have seen quarterbacks that have really been nothing. They quoted three: Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Daniel Jones, finding a way to turn around their careers with a new organization. And maybe that's what Tua needs. And maybe hopefully for him, he shows out, and I get to come on this show and say, I was wrong. All Tua needed was to go to Atlanta. So he's got tools around him. He's got a lot of tools around him. I'm really excited to see what he does. And in the sense that I'm really excited to hopefully be proven correct. But at the same time, I hope he proves me wrong, and we'll see where he goes. I'm not going to talk a ton on this. The 49ers signed Mike Evans. Why on earth you're going to... I don't know what they're doing. I know I have some friends that are 49er fans. I'm going to hopefully be talking to them soon on the show. And hopefully they can justify why signing a 32-year-old injury-ridden receiver, whilst he may be one of the best of the modern era, I don't get it. I don't love the move. And that's why we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about it. I know they've had some some issues, especially in that position group with personalities and different things. But I don't think Mike Evans is any less of a personality issue. And he's 32 and he's injury ridden. So we'll see where that goes. Now, we go to the last one I'm very excited about, one I know my good friend of mine's is excited about. And it leads us into our next part of the show about talking about the Steelers. The Steelers trade for Michael Pittman, wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr., excuse me. I know a lot of people that are sensitive on the junior. So, Michael Pittman Jr. I love this deal. I absolutely love this deal. I think it gives you a proven receiver. He cost a decent bit, but not too much, I don't think, for what he's going to provide. He's far from a number one, but I think it allows DK to slide back into a true number one spot if we can kind of get the offense based around what we have. The only thing now that is concerning is we've taken moves like Pittman Jr. and we have DK, and now we have a good, in my mind, 1-2 combo. We have some tight ends coming back that I think are going to help. We've talked about the new staff and some possibilities of involving tight ends into some of the new scheme and making scheme around tight end play. I think your biggest concern and question now is, what are we doing at the quarterback position that's going to support these moves? I don't think Aaron Rodgers is that option. I don't think he's that decision. I know there's a pretty decent chance that he's going to be that decision. I frankly am tired of waiting. I don't know why Omar Khan isn't. I don't know why Art Rooney isn't. And I frankly, even with their history, I don't know why Mike McCarthy isn't ready to move on from all this waiting for a 42-year-old quarterback that, frankly, as much as he did last year, he didn't. He's not the answer. He is not the answer. And it's time that Steelers leadership sees that. And I don't understand why the waiting game hasn't showed that enough. I don't. I think once we can kind of get past the whole lore around Aaron Rodgers and the fact that, wow, we had him in Pittsburgh, I think we can kind of see that, yeah, we had him in Pittsburgh and it didn't work. Let's give Will Howard a shot. Let's let him be backed up by Mason Rudolph, who I don't think is a very good backup. But now you can play, right? I think if you sell out on Will Howard, as much as I've been outspoken about not doing it, I don't have a problem with you drafting a quarterback. I really don't. So I think there's still, with solidifying some answers at the wide receiver group, we'll talk about the draft here in a minute, but I think it frees you up to do some stuff with free agency being moving around and stuff happening. I think it allows you to attack the draft maybe a little bit more openly and freely. And I think, the mock draft we're talking about is Chad Reuter from the NFL.com. And I love the trajectory he's going with, because it's one that I've talked about too, where if you can attack this free agency time period, maybe like I said at the top of the show, it's not in signing, it's in making deals, it's in making these trades that kind of help you out. Taking a wide receiver in a trade is a great move, because now, as Chad Reuter says, they take in the first round offensive tackle out of Clemson, Blake Miller, to solidify your offensive line. One of the concerns I addressed when talking about the Ravens move, with whether it had been Max Crosby, I still think you need to solidify your line to compete with Trey Hendrickson. Maybe not as much as you would have needed to with Crosby, but I think the Pittman Jr. deal allows you to attack the offensive line in the draft, solidifying that. I'm over the Broderick Jones thing. That was, reading his mock draft, all he talked about was Broderick Jones coming back from injury. I think Broderick Jones hasn't done enough to show that he is the guy at tackle, especially if we go younger at quarterback. I think draft a guy. I like Blake Miller. I don't think that's a bad option. But I think whoever is there, taking a Pittman Jr. through trade allows us to say, okay, we have a little bit of a breathing room. I think they still need to draft a receiver. I still think they can work in free agency. I still think, your undrafted guys, the undrafted free agent market's going to be there, that we can go get a receiver or two. Let's focus this first round on an offensive lineman that we so desperately need. I think a tackle is a great way to go. And that's honestly, maybe I need to specify it. I think go get a tackle. Don't go get an offensive lineman. Go get a tackle. And that's really where we're going to wrap it up for football. I think it's been a great free agency market. Make sure you tell me if there's another deal you want to talk about. If there's anybody else, if I missed something, if I misspoke on something, tell me. Right? I know I'm not right on everything. These are just my opinions. We'll jump from football. We're going to talk very briefly about March Madness. Like I said, it's going to be a brief talk. I'm not going to get too specific just because I think it's still too early to really dive into it. I mean, and really the first round hasn't been anything overtly surprising. I'm really proud of myself. I called the VCU North Carolina. I talked about it at work yesterday. I don't think you can bet on North Carolina basketball. And that's really, to me, the biggest upset. I know, what was it, High Point over Wisconsin? That was impressive. But the VCU North Carolina game, you can't bet on North Carolina. I was very proud of myself. I am never successful remotely, and it kind of is for lack of trying, but I don't understand basketball, so therefore when I get to it, I often try to, I'm an underdog believer. My favorite movie, one of my favorite movies is Rudy, the other is Rocky, both kind of underdogs, but I get excited about the underdog stories. I tend to pick underdogs. I was very proud of myself. I think I picked a pretty solid bracket this year. Shout out to the McElhaney family tournament pool, which I am currently just absolutely killing it in. I have Michigan. We will put my projection out there. I do have Michigan. I think it's really Michigan or Duke's tournament to lose. I did do a little preparation in regard to my bracket. I did watch some videos, some highlights, a little bit of basketballing. Kate, is that a term? Basketballing? Sure. Okay. I got the approval to say basketballing. I think it's Michigan or Duke's tournament to lose. The only game to finish so far today in round 2, prior to us recording, is Michigan versus St. Louis. The one thing I'll say, I felt so intellectual talking about it, was what I think Michigan did really well, and maybe it was just in a comparison to St. Louis, so maybe I'm wrong on this, but watching the St. Louis-Michigan game, St. Louis kept pushing the threes, and I told Kate, I go, here's because she, rightfully so, because it was close coming into at the start of the second half and everything, and Kate said, this is going to be a good game, and it was, but the thing is like St. Louis kept pushing for threes and taking the threes and shooting threes, and they have their big fella looks like me playing basketball, giving hope to big guys, but like at some point the three's not going to be there, and that's why I told Kate. I said Michigan is going to win this game because at some point the three is not going to be there, and Michigan was driving down, making routine plays routinely, that opened some 3-point opportunities for them. They were able to take advantage of that, really widen the gap, because at some point for St. Louis, the three wasn't there. And it fell apart for them. Michigan runs away with it. We'll talk more of that next week. But as of now, I'm still feeling pretty good about the Wolverines. I'm feeling really good about where I'm at in the bracket challenge. Folks, this has kind of been a shorter episode. We do have our I Was Thinking segment coming up, so we'll see. I gotta learn technology here. I had to open it up with a link. Again, we are on the subreddit, Am I the Asshole? And the title of this Am I the Asshole? Oh, is there a whole sports thing on this, Kate?
I don't know if it's like their own subreddit, but
Yeah.
if you search "Am I the Asshole Sports," a lot comes up.
Because this is impressive. How many sports related? Because you can see the other stories on the side there. But alrighty. So this Am I the Asshole segment, titled again from the subreddit Am I the Asshole for putting my daughter in a sport. I don't have to read this and I can say no, but for funsies, let's dive in. Am I the asshole for putting my 13-year-old daughter into, well, I can't say automatically no. Let's see. Am I the asshole for putting my 13-year-old daughter into sports after she said she didn't want to? So my daughter is a freshman, and she came to me saying that she didn't want to do high school sports, but she doesn't do anything at all. Or she doesn't do anything all day besides stay in her room playing games, crocheting, and drawing. I felt as if putting her in a sport would help her get out of her shell since she doesn't know anybody at her school, but she always comes home from practice looking mad and sad. And/or sad. She says that she hates it, but I think she's overreacting. She's probably just being lazy. Okay. Yes, you are the asshole. We're going to hard pause right there. Yes, you are absolutely the asshole. We'll talk about why in a little bit. Recently, she tried to tell me that her going to basketball was a waste of both of our times, saying that my reasons for putting her in were invalid. How she didn't really make friends, how I said she would, and that she could have just worked out on her own if I wanted her to stay fit. Then she had the audacity to lock herself in her room and with a note on the door saying, with a note on the door. It does say not, folks. I'm not that bad at reading. With a note on the door saying, my final answer is that I will not go, please. It made me so furious that I took her door. And now she's acting differently and barely talking. Am I the asshole? I cannot express how much of an asshole this person is. Truly. And that's coming from me who, as me and Kate have, talked about, family plans and what we want to do, this person is 1000% the asshole. I'm a sports guy. Kate's a sports, lady. We both value athletics and what those sports can do, but we've also both seen the negative side of those sports and what the negative side of what sports can do. So anybody, and I get the parental influence on a child, and that there are pros and cons, and you want the best for your child, and that I'm a firm believer in what this parent seems to think sports can do in their child's life. I do strongly believe that, but I also strongly believe that this parent is a major gaping asshole to think that, first off, there's so many problems with this. Looking at it from a former coaching perspective, if the student does not want to be there, if the athlete doesn't want to be there, you are putting them at risk for injury, their teammates at risk for injury, and the people that they're sharing the court with, because it seems that the parent pushed the child into basketball. You're risking all three of those groups in terms of injury. Okay. Secondly, we all like what we like. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing games, crocheting, drawing. The thing that I think sports gets, people don't talk about enough, is where sports fall in terms of a creative outlet. So, in comparison, playing games, crocheting, drawing, these activities that are apparently corrupting this parent's child's mind, they're a creative outlet that you can go out and have a community around. Maybe it's not in person. That's the beauty of technology, is that our communities in different groups are at our fingertips, countries away, states away, and the ability to grow your network and your community in what you like to do has never been easier. And I don't think, if sports isn't your forte, great. Good for you being able to figure that out. Now, I do encourage you to go find it, because life is hard to do, let alone do on your own. But don't force anybody into sports just because, I remember playing sports and that, I had this and this and this. Now my, this and this and this. I don't understand that. I don't. Sports is just as much a creative outlet as anything else. Right? So you don't need it. You're putting them at physical risk. And the mental aspect that comes into this too. I'm a firm believer in the pros and the cons of sports and athletics in the mental health debate. If you think this is going to do any kind of positive for a child that does not want to be involved in sports, you're dead ass wrong. Like, there's no benefit to putting a child into sports that does not want to be in sports. There's zero benefit. This parent, in my opinion, will read the comments, but horrible job at parenting. And I can't say that from experience, obviously, but horrible. Not a ton of comments. Not a ton. I thought there wasn't. So let's start here. You are the asshole. Parents like you ruin their children. You force your daughter into something she hated. Then when she expresses her feelings and locks herself in her room for privacy because she's validly upset, you remove the door. I hope this kid gets out as soon as she can. But another commenter, fully agree. Instead of doing what you want her to do, listen to her and find out what she wants to do. If you want her to make friends, then do your research for art classes or whatever she seems to enjoy. She is her own person and has the ability to make her own decisions. A mother's job is to nurture this. Otherwise, you may have a bad relationship and ultimately lose your daughter, which would be devastating to both parties. Again, I think I'm not a father. I haven't had to make I haven't had to make decisions that parents do. I think this is 1,000% detrimental to your child. This reminds me of the poor girl at my son's school. Her parents forced her on. Wow, this is a comment. This is interesting. This reminds me of the poor girl at my son's school. Her parents forced her onto the football team. She literally didn't want to be there, and the parents were using her gender to force coaches' hands. This came to light when the coaches were harping about her not running that she had it. Wow. Not running that she had a heart condition. The girl medically can't be on the team, so the coaches spoke with the parents and removed her from the team and gave other coaches the headship about the parents trying to force the girl onto the team and lying about. That's got to be a crime.
Maybe a lawsuit.
That's got to be a lawsuit. Kudos to the coaches for kind of calling some nonsense. I think football is for everybody. I do. The point that I made, and here's the thing, and I'm assuming this wasn't a female only football team when I read that comment. The thing that I'll say in terms of that story, I think that screams the point that I made earlier about a kid. Here's the difference between football and basketball, because they are both physical in their own sense. But the thing with football is when you don't have an interest in it and you don't want to be there, and you are literally, the hits are car crashes, right? The impact is the equivalent of a car crash at times. You are only setting your child and the other individuals on that field up for injury. And they can be devastating injuries in any game. I can only really speak from my experience in football. These can be absolutely devastating injuries. And just because you want to make a point as a parent, you do not have the right to do that. I can't say that from experience. Please forgive me if that upsets you. You are the asshole. I don't think you could be more of an asshole. How about seeing if there's a social group your daughter wants to join, like a crochet group or an art group? I talk about the community in sports because that's the community I've had around me. Sports is a group of is an interest group, is an area of people's interest. It's not the end all be all. There are other groups, right? So when I sit here and talk about the sports community and the athletic community and the football community and basketball community and the baseball community that we're going to be talking about here very soon as opening day approaches, there's there's a crocheting community. There are art communities. The beauty of life is that we are all different and can somehow and sometimes converge on these common grounds when we're allowed to find our path there. There's a lot of F words in here. I'm not going to read this one, but I will summarize it in that this commenter does believe that the parent is the asshole. You are the asshole. Your daughter is an adult whose life you can't control. Give her back. I don't believe in autonomy. This comment says give her back her door and autonomy. I do believe in giving back. I think Kate can correct me if I'm wrong here. I do believe that the door does represent a necessary separation of church and state in a family. There are times when, bless you, Kate sneezed. There are times where, I could picture myself as a father. The child shuts the door. There may be times to kick the door down, but the door still needs to stand, right? I got a head shake at that. So we'll see how that goes down the road. But I don't believe in autonomy. A 13-year-old, I know me at 13, I'm surprised at 28 people let me make decisions for myself. But definitely at 13, you're not, no. In terms of this, if you have no interest in it, yes, express that you have no interest in it, but you don't have autonomy. I thank God every day Kate's here, so I don't have autonomy. At 28. So I I don't think I can express it any clearer. I think this is um pretty clear in the comments. Kate, would you concur with the opinion I've made today? This parent is 100% the asshole. Tell me if you disagree. Tell me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm not a parent. The only thing I disagree with in the comments is the autonomy thing. No, a 13-year-old does not deserve autonomy. No, they don't deserve complete independence. If you want to do that, go see how the real world works and you'll come running back home. We'll go ahead and wrap up the show today. Again, tell me if I'm wrong on that, but that parent's the asshole. 1,000% the asshole. You have every right to maybe guide your daughter. I think they said that too. Guide your child in what they like. Help build the community around your child. Don't force them into something they don't want to be a part of. Make sure you follow us on all our socials: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Find us wherever you catch your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. We're approaching the draft. We got a lot of things coming. I can't wait for the draft. As terrified as I am about going to the draft, I don't think the city's going to ever be ready for this draft. So we'll see how that goes. Very excited about it, though. Very, once in a lifetime experience. This week's quote, I think something we're going to approach next week. We may approach it. We are going to pre-record Easter's episode. Got a lot of things going on. The Easter Bunny's hopping on into town. Pittsburgh. So maybe that'll be an Easter subject, but I want to dive in. We talked about him earlier. Today's quote comes from Jim Valvano. That may be an episode to dive into Jimmy V's ESPY speech from 1993. Today's quote: "If you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. That's a heck of a day. You do that 7 days a week, you're going to have something special." We'll talk about that more once we dive in. That might be next week, because now I might just start writing that. If you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. That's a heck of a day. You do that 7 days a week, you're going to have something special. Involve that in your life. Find meaning in that. Engage yourself emotionally, and you're going to have a great life. You're going to have a great week. We'll see you next week. Always remember, keep thinking. We'll see you next time.